welcome to Sober Dad Crew, the podcast where we talk about all things dad, sobriety, recovery, parenting, music, tattoos, and more. For more information or to get in touch, visit soberdadcrew.com. Welcome to the first episode of 2023. I took a little time off with the holiday, but now I'm back with Sam Parlett, sober dad and owner of Benjamin Peters Men's Clothing Store in Ithaca, New York. Sam, welcome to Sober Dad Crew.
Thanks for having me, man.
Absolutely. To start, how many kids do you have?
I've got one right now and one on the way. My little guy is 2.5. You've got a couple, right?
I have four. So I'm engaged for my second marriage. So my biological kids are 15 and 19. And then my stepkids, who I don't consider my stepkids, but that's how people understand that, are 6. My stepson and my stepdaughter just turned 11 Friday. So wow. I've got a range. Yeah. This summer, I will have been a parent for 20 years, which is sort of crazy to me. And I joke with my fiance that, I love you so much that I'm listening to kids' music again. I probably have told that joke like every time on this, but yeah, it's interesting, that sort of perspective of seeing the hard work up front and then seeing like where your kids, where they go. And that point with my son, who's 19, he's like making his way in the world. Sort of like, all right, not that the work's totally done, but yeah.
Point at the end of like high school where people haven't really sank or swim like on their own yet. It's just kind of, they're just sort of a reflection of their parents, and then they find themselves within that.
Yeah, and he's opted not to go to college. He did an overseas semester, academic semester, loved being in Costa Rica, didn't love the schoolwork. So he's actually trained to be a mechanic, which is great. I mean, we need people who are passionate about that and willing to do that kind of work. Absolutely. We're sort of desperate for anyone who wants to go into the trades now. But, you have to sort of step back and let them make their way a little bit. And when they're little, you have really high guardrails, that you put up, and then the guardrails kind of go down a little bit every year. And I just was talking to my teenage daughter the other day. I was driving to drop her off at a track meet and saying, right now, really, my job is to keep you from like flying off the road. But the road is yours, right? This journey is yours. I just really don't want you to fly off. Otherwise, you figure it out on your own. I'm there, your mom's there, your stepmom's there. Like, people are around for you to talk to you, but you kind of got to like work this thing out on your own, this thing called life.
Have you seen that new Pixar movie, Strange World?
I have not.
I'm a huge animation guy. Like, I had originally gone to art school for animation. That movie, it was so well done, and it's a modern day father-son saga. It's really great. I kind of feel with my son, I'm trying to shape him. I'm a little bit kind of projecting. I don't want him to be like me, but all of my kind of flaws that I know of myself are just sort of like human flaws. Feel a little bit Wizard of Oz, kind of trying to get him to act right by like kind of big, like, you have to act right. But if he was to poke a hole in there or pull the curtain back, I'm kind of just like, yeah, it's all right, buddy. You can have another piece of candy, but just remember that I wagged my finger to you.
I mean, I just remember bringing my son home and going like, who the hell thought this was like a good idea to give me a baby? Right?
Yeah.
Like, oh my God. But I always knew I wanted to be a dad from when I was a little kid. Did you always want to be a dad, or?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of came into it like as I became an adult. I always sort of assumed it. I had my home life was good. My upbringing was good. So I had a really positive idea of a family and a home life. So yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, mine was like that too. Like, I don't have a large list of grievances. Like with my parents, they were present. They were really involved. So did you get sober before or after you had a kid?
I was pretty fortunate in that my journey and kind of my rock bottom and aha moment was at 21. So I was pretty lucky. I'm 30 now. So even my wife, I met her after getting sober. I met her kind of within that first year and a half being out of rehab. So she's never even seen me drink, which is, it's just an interesting kind of thought. Like you're saying, you have a child that's 20 years old. I'm getting to the now where I've been sober for 9 years. I was really only rip roaring there for like 5 or 6. So yeah, I got sober ahead of time, which was great. One of the thoughts that I had when I kind of first got sober, I was big into the meetings. It was all about kind of giving me a place to be in the
Hmm.
and everything. I remember having this thought of like, now that I'm showing up for things and participating and being more available at my job, I just don't have enough time in the day to get done all the things I would like to try to get done. How did I have time to just be fooling around before?
I actually never did meetings. I just stopped and I did therapy, and that worked for me. My fiance is also sober. I'll be 13 years next month. So clearly, my kids were around. My daughter doesn't remember, and my son remembers a little bit. But I was always the 2 glasses, 3 glasses of wine. I was never ripped, but I always used it as medication every day. And it got to be a little more and a little more. And finally, I was like, this is not good. This is not who I want to be. This is not the parent I want to be with their mom. This is not the spouse I want to be.
It kind of no longer defines me as much. I don't start the sentence with "My name is Sam and I'm an alcoholic" kind of a
Right.
thing. In the way that a person would call themselves a born again Christian. Oh, I don't drink, but I don't drink because I had a reawakening kind of a
Right.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not just, I don't know, like a straight edge punk that just never drank or
Yeah.
something, right? So yeah, and I think there is a difference. I think all those paths work for people because I think people, at least a lot of the straight edge folks I know, that's a response to some home life stuff. Whoa, like I saw my dad like that. I'm just not being that way. So the way to not be that way is to just never touch anything, which,
Yeah.
is a solid approach to being healthy, I guess.
Yeah. Straight edge is pretty punk rock. And like when I think of punk rock, there's the musical part of it, and musically it's disruptive, but what it really means is the community of the DIY kids kind of going
100%. Yep.
through an emotion together. So like the whole like straight edge community, they're kind of going through that same thing together, like an angsty kind of thing. And I think the meetings, the 12-step meetings, kind of have a sort of a punk rocky vibe. It's we've got 518 in Ithaca is great, but anytime the program kind of strays from the word in any way, like and becomes corporate or kind of sponsored or funded, it just gets it loses the spirit of people being there because they're choosing to be there and they're choosing to go through it. So
And
I really like the meetings, and it gave me a place to be in like the community of these are the people who are going through this at the same time.
right. And a sober community, if you're trying to pull away from sort of your community that reinforced the behavior that wasn't working for you. But I think meetings and AA in general, it's kind of amazing because of the no corporate, the none, it just exists in these places, in these 518 sort of facility, but it's in churches, it's in all these places, and it's just there and it's free, right? It's not, there's no financial barrier to entry in a time when, people trying to find and afford like a therapist is nearly impossible.
There was one a meeting when I was going every single day. I don't anymore, especially now through COVID. It's all like virtual. But when I was going a lot, my buddy was living in New York City, and there's actually a meeting spot. It's called like the Playhouse or something. It's right outside Port Authority. It's literally just a door covered in stickers
Right.
between two massive buildings that you can go in and go up the stairs, and there's just a meeting spot that's just covered. The walls are covered in stickers, and everybody signed the walls, and there's just a meeting spot right there. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, and right, they're everywhere. I mean, I've talked to, one of my guests who's like been to meetings in India. He's like, I celebrated 20 years of sobriety with folks in India that I didn't know, but I found a meeting. And
So
so
cool.
it is cool. For a long time, and we kind of have connected, I guess, professionally a little bit. And then I go into your store and you saw me at this Recovery Rocks event in Ithaca. And for a long time, and I think this was part of AA too, right? You weren't supposed to just talk about it. It was real quiet. And I kind of feel that's this old school sort of shame model. So I've been pretty public about it. Where do you kind of land on that?
It's one of these things, if somebody asks about it, I will bring it up. I try not to as much be defined by my trauma. I don't want it to be like a Boy Scout badge because I had to try a couple times to get sober, and there was a couple times when I was kind of just I made everything a metaphor for my sobriety, and it kind of got to be a bit much. But I'm pretty open about it if it comes up. I try not to say anything. I can just order a soda and say I don't like alcohol.
Right. Yeah, I drink a lot of seltzer, a lot of coffee. I keep saying like Wegmans should sponsor me for the amount of seltzer of theirs. I drink, and I had chronic depression and some anxiety, and there was this period. I remember, I think I was walking downtown, and I had this moment. I was like, I like can't be defined by this. Depression will always be there for me, right? It's very reliable. So I need to find a way to not actually define myself by like the disease, but actually define myself around sort of success and surviving and building this new life. I say now getting remarried and all this, it's none of that. My professional life would have come without that decision to get sober. I don't know what that other path would have looked like. Probably not superlative, but really I feel like the good things really have come from that decision.
I feel like I kind of grew up a little angsty and then sort of kept it going with the drinking and the drugs, but it got pretty dark for me. So I mean, I ended up having to actually go to a rehab. I was sort of in a position where it wasn't required, but I was kind of on probation and I had failed a drug test, and it was sort of if I go to rehab, I could probably get like a it looks more favorable or potentially show up not having gone to rehab. And so I had already tried a little bit of the outpatient and it really kind of hadn't worked for me. So I did 28 days at Tully Hill in it's like by Syracuse, pretty
Yeah,
close to here.
In Tully.
Yeah.
There's not a
Yeah.
lot in Tully, but that's there. And people talk
It's
about that.
I know nothing of Tully except for that spot right off the highway.
And soon in Ithaca, we're going to have 24-hour open access detox, which is going to be really, I think, amazing and beneficial to the community. And one of the great things there is no matter like when you show up or whatever, they will get you. Even if you show up with another mental health issue, you will be helped in some way or connected to the resources you need. And it's 24/7. I mean, it's really, we're going to be fortunate in this community because I think, you see it, you work in the heart of downtown. I work on West State Street, and you walk around and it's rough out there. People are struggling and it's heavy, and to find a way to help them is really important.
Absolutely. A lot of times, not all the time, but sometimes it just comes down to sort of mental health. At a certain point, either like neurologically predisposed or sort of people on a path down on their luck. My wife actually works with autistic children,
Hmm.
all ages, but a lot of nonverbal teens, students that are not able to participate at school that will be dropped off at this other facility where they can kind of give them a structured curriculum and they can sort of prove that they're learning things and getting better at life skills with these like charts to prove that they're improving and understanding. And a lot of times in the school system, they might end up having sort of behavioral issues or presenting as somebody that's not going to get along just because the school doesn't have the resource to
Right.
give them the time and actually allow them to be a part of it. On the commons, even, I was on the board of the Downtown Ithaca Alliance, where there's business improvement districts, so they
Yep.
get funding to kind of do the festivals and things. They actually had hired a liaison down there to just sort of go up to all the people that were down there begging and sort of give them a place to like clean up and shave and make sure they were signed up for health insurance and things like that they might not have known they had. And it was a program. Her name was Tammy at first. It might still be Tammy, they might have replaced her, but that was still funded, and I think the city was gonna match it to add another person that could go beyond the scope of our little
Yeah.
businesses. Because even just sitting down and saying, like, "Are you okay? Do you have a place? Do you need anything serious? Like, do you have kinda health coverage right now, or do you?" You know what the pantries are?
Right. And, and Ithaca is like, for those who don't know, it's a pretty small city, and I think fairly decently resourced because of Cornell. But, the struggles are still real here. And I think part of that is when I try and take my lunchtime walk and, just at least interacting with people who talk to you. And people come down differently on should you give people money, should you not give people money? I mean, that's sort of a personal choice you have to make, but at least, and my son is like brilliant at this, just like really interacting with people and treating them like a human being, even if it kind of makes you uncomfortable. If you recoil against someone, like what message does that send? So it's really pretty great. And I actually had never heard about that program, so that, we are putting resources as a community into trying to connect to people. I mean, Ithaca has a safe injection site. Like dead people don't get better. And I get that not everyone feels comfortable with that or driving around, and that's some of that's privilege, to have the privilege to not have struggle. But addiction does not really discriminate at all. I mean, a lot of people, whether you're resourced or not, you can fall into it. It's a slippery slope.
It's a tough one, honestly. Even if you ask for help, it might not always be possible. It might not always take the first time. And you were saying before, you were asking me if I was like ashamed of it. There is so much shame around it, and I think a lot of times there's folks who they get pretty close to wanting to ask for help, but then you could go years not taking that step and just living the same day over and over again. And I think I was lucky in that I had a job. I was living at my parents' house at the time I was 21, and so I was still kinda getting it out of my system. I thought, like, part of growing up was overachieving a little bit, testing the boundaries of my
Yeah.
conscience. But I had a job, and I really felt like part of a family, but for the first time ever, if I was to lose this job, it is a family, but it's not a family that would still be there for me if I completely dropped the ball. So I was sort of it was sort of a blindside for my boss at the time. I kind of said like, "Hey, can we talk about something? I I can give you 2 weeks notice on this. I'm gonna have to go away. I have a drink problem and I'm in some trouble and I have to go away." And that was I had tried before. I had done the outpatient and I'd been sort of in sort of the probation system. There's kind of that revolving door where you kind of stay on probation, which is its own animal.
Yeah.
And I had every reason to just give it up and try to take myself seriously. I'd already dropped out of art school. I was, owing student debt at the time, and had every resource, every reason to stop. And until I was finally just sort of more open about like, I think I need some help. And honestly, some people around me, it's so funny. I thought I was hiding a problem, but a lot of the times, if I say it out
Yeah.
loud, most people are like, yeah,
Yeah.
we
No
were
kidding.
ashamed of it this whole time, but just so you know, we already loved you anyway, and we're allowing that to
Right.
happen.
And you
Which
weren't
is
hiding it well.
yeah,
You're not 100% sneaky in your like drinking problem. But that's got to be, a hard sort of work conversation to have. And I'm really open about it at work, but it took me a long time to kind of get there and feel comfortable. Some of that was being a single dad and like, oh, there's no other paycheck but mine. And if somebody reads this or takes this the wrong way and it puts my job at risk, I'm putting my family at risk. In the position I have now, I kind of went in and I was like, look, I'm gonna be open about this. I just almost 13 years. I'm sort of the kind of person you want to have in your employment. Everybody has problems, so I've tried to deal with mine and set a good example, and in the work world just represent what being healthy can be. But I didn't also have to sit down with a boss and say like, oh, rehab. So that, that must have been, how did the boss react?
honestly, he was more than I could have ever asked for. He was super nice about it. He didn't give me any kind of shit. He just said, if there's anything I can do to help you, and I didn't expect him to keep the job. They did hire somebody when I left, but when I came back into town, he got a hold of me and asked me if I would feel comfortable, when I would feel comfortable coming back to work. And that was Benjamin Peters, and now I own the place.
Yeah, so that right, that in and of itself is amazing, right? I mean, that's just a good story about what recovery can do. And also, I know the former owner, that's a community-minded family. And right, what a smart, gracious employer can do, and one that's understanding. Like that's, such a cool and important story.
Yeah, and now as an employer, my employees, they're great. They don't seem to have any sort of similar issues, but when I put myself in that same type of situation, I imagine that that's kind of the only way you really can be. If you keep it shame based, then they're just hiding it from you. And if they were hiding it from you anyway, it's sort of hope that you're okay and you're able to continue to show up. And like I said, I just always kind of felt like it was a family, but it was a different family. I wasn't just born into it. So it was something where if I dropped the ball, it could potentially shatter on the ground.
Yeah, I mean, it does, go back to show what a good employer can do. So where I work now, there's a point. So my, parents are in their 80s, and my mom has Alzheimer's, and she's in the hospital. And my phone rang is like 8:30 in the morning, and I'm at work. I'm like, it's my dad calling at 8:30 in the morning. Like some shit is going on. Something's up. I went to more than one owner of the company, but I went to one. He's like, whatever you need to do. He's like, if you need to go, like, get in your car now and drive to Maine. He's like, don't worry about the work, family above everything. And it's such a relief to have sort of an employer like that does just put the human first. Because I've worked at places that weren't that way. I mean, I actually worked at one place that was a stockholder traded company. And one day they're like, utilization numbers. I was like, oh, when you say utilization number, you're actually talking about a person. And that you're talking about that person as a dollar sign. The utilization number is how much money that person makes for the company. I was like, that's messed up. That's like 100% really weird.
Yeah, when you scale anything up, like you're saying, Fortune 500 company versus small business, when you scale something up, in order to make it scale, you have to be super reductive and you come up with a number to quantify a position. And it just becomes sort of cold and loses the warmth.
That place was really terrible. If you made a lot of money for them, they would tolerate any behavior. Pretty much. I mean, there's probably a few limits, but really you could, there's one guy who would just yell at people. Yelled at me, and when I left, they said, "Oh, did thus and such apologize to you after that day?" And I started laughing. I was like, "Of course he didn't. You just said he should apologize, and he was never going to apologize." It's like, this is not the place for me. This is not where I want to exist for whatever 45, 50 hours a week.
Yeah. My one other interesting thing about my job that kind of relates. So I'm a clothing guy, men's clothing, and a tailor. And so in studying and learning kind of the history of clothing to sort of see where it's at right now, you also sort of learn the cultural context of all the clothing and the history and everything. And it is just so interesting the difference between slow fashion, which is it's just so classic. It has been perfected. Like the thing has already been perfected, sort of like a cheeseburger. I'm gonna get real far off here and I'm gonna bring it
No,
back.
I wanted to talk about clothing anyway, so this is good.
There's a term in fashion similar to food. You would call something fast. That's
Yeah,
an
yeah.
adjective to describe something that was mass produced. It's something that can be mass produced and it's just good enough to make just enough people happy enough for just this amount of time. And anytime you scale something up globally, that's what happens. If a company gets too big, it becomes so much about the number. You lose kind of the humanity, which could relate back into sort of recovery programs. And when the thing gets so big, it loses the humanity. So yeah, in clothing, the fast fashion, it's overproduced. There's things like Man, I'm getting way off topic here. I'm sorry.
No, it's good because I was going to ask you about clothes. I was trying to look up. There's a documentary because I've actually read a bunch about fast fashion because I love clothes, and it was like the bass player in Blur, and he did this documentary on fast fashion. Super cool. I think you can see it on Amazon, but it's like you go to Target, try and find clothes, have a professional demeanor, so you can go there and stuff's cheap, so you're really like, oh, I'll just buy that, and then you don't even necessarily wear it, and it costs you $20. Oh, it's like cheap and accessible. It is. It's sort of the fast food of the clothing world. They're made overseas. Like if you're buying a pair of jeans at Target, which I have bought for 20 or $25, how much is the person on the front end of that supply chain making? It's got to be pennies.
Yeah. And we have the better garments, maybe made in Canada, some made in the United States. And then we also have pieces made in China. Some consumers are more conscious of that, some are not. But sometimes when they're just asking about price, we do have the cheaper option. That's kind of what the fast food is like, this is the cheaper option. So of the cheaper options, we only have things that are like respectable. But a lot of the industry becomes, as it's more sold online and things like that, the industry becomes more polyester. The problem with the fast fashion is it's fast because you have to keep putting it out because it's not good enough to last. It's going to break down. People are going to realize that they didn't like it anyway. They're going to try to donate it. But when they donate it, does it actually dissolve into the culture? Because natural fibers, cotton, linen, wool, first and foremost, from a fabric perspective, they outperform everything. And if you bury it in the ground, it will compost and
Right.
feed the soil again because it was all made from the soil. It's real. It participates back into the evolution of the soil and what grows and what eats what grows and things. And some of these easier to produce fabrics, in order to try to mimic the properties that wool has, there's a lot of kind of sporty like polyester
Yep.
blends to try to give it stretch and shape retention and moisture wicking. But that is plastic. Polyester is just plastic, and plastic will interrupt the food chain the way that a cancer would. It refuses to die. It's
Right.
not natural. And there's more of that being put into the world than there ever was. Suits and things. Suits, well-made clothes last for decade. They last long enough that a person could be a tailor. Their whole job is just readjusting the shape of the clothes over time so that it
You had
keeps
to
fitting.
do that for me after a little few years of COVID. You had to take some pants out for me because they were a little snug post COVID.
Well, I was going to say about that with the adjusting the waist so that it's perfect. That's really just the impression that you send with formal wear or business attire, suits and things. The impression you're sending is just right off the bat, right with your outfit, you're saying, I put some effort into this outfit. And you could tell when the person tightens the pants don't look like they're too tight. The belt doesn't look like it's making a flour sack underneath it because there's too much fabric. I love that about clothes. And part of, my whole recovery process, I think a big part of it was that I had this store and the fact that my job is selling suits and ties. And I look like a business person because I'm in a suit and tie, but my business is just selling suits and ties to people who are trying to look serious. I just automatically look serious. I'm selling the ability to present yourself how you want to. And the tendency, when you're very conscious of it, is just going to be traditional clothing because anything that strays away from the tradition, the message you're sending about yourself is however far off of that baseline, that's the message you're sending. You're wearing a Rolling Stones t-shirt, you're saying, I love music. I love kind of the Rolling Stones, You wear a tie-dye shirt and some socks and sandals, you might be saying, I might not be paying my taxes. I'm probably high right now. But if you have, like you're wearing a button up right now, super clean.
Right.
I got a
I
t-shirt that
iron on the weekends.
love it.
There's a respect to the other people too. I go to work, I put some effort into this, and I'm saying, like, I respect the job, I respect the position, I respect my coworkers, I respect the people I'm meeting with.
It says you can trust me.
Yeah. So the other sort of fashion thing that drives me crazy though is just trying to find, I just want like a cotton shirt. I don't want wrinkle free. I actually like to iron. I don't want like those chemicals against my body. And it can be really, especially in that fast fashiony world, because of the polyester and all that stuff, it's hard to find the stuff that's, what do they put on those things to make them not iron? Like, I don't want that. I don't want to wash my other clothes with that.
Yeah, so sometimes, and especially maybe like 7, 8 years ago, they were using formaldehyde as the chemical, and yeah, that would be
Yeah.
pretty. That's pretty rough. They have gotten better. There's one brand, Benjamin Peters. It's we've got a pretty good non-iron right now, but there's actually a lot of shirt companies that make some nice cottons. There's a Scott Barber right now is a shirt program we have where it's not non-iron, and that was one of the things they told us as they were presenting it is, now guys, all your customers are gonna ask, it is not non-iron, but yeah, you're right. It's more natural. Every generation does one thing to the format.
Mm-hmm.
They dress in the suit, but your generation will do one thing to change it. Right now, we're getting into an era with, like you were saying, the non-iron chemicals and the stretchy things are a little not quite breathable enough. It's evolving though. It's evolving with us to a nice kind of a medium fit.
I was grateful to the evolution to the thinner tie because I'm like a pretty small guy. And if you put like one of those old school 80s ties on me, it looks like I'm wearing a bib. So for me, like to have a thin tie, it's also a little like the punk guy in me kind of likes a skinny tie in that sort of Elvis Costello kind of way. But it also just looks better on my body because I'm just not a big guy, which is also why buying clothes that fit are important. As the owner of a men's clothes, are like style tips for guys because there's a lot of frumpy guys out there. It's often the clothes just don't seem to fit them. I don't know if it's because they think they're a little heavier, and if they wear this blousy thing, it's somehow hiding that.
There's quite a lot of aspects. I might get way off the trail again. I'll
It's
try to keep
good
this.
that this show always gets off the trail.
So I would say anecdotally, I don't know if I use that word properly, but one thing that happens a lot is you'll have a guy who's self-conscious about their size of their legs or maybe the size of their body. So they want their pants to be slim. So they're just so focused on the pant being slim because they think that slim equals a good look, that the pants are too slim because they're so fixated on it being slim enough and is this slim enough that they forget the principle that if your pants are too small, it makes you look too big. It's no longer slimming. So there's that aspect. And then also within the fast fashion conversation, when you go to a sort of a big box version of what we do, where maybe the people working there are in a similar way, it's been inflated. They are an asset that's quantified based on,
Yeah.
whatever. And maybe they're not really into the culture of clothing. So they're just sort of helping you find what you say you want. At a place like Benjamin Peters, where we have 3 employees full time, and if there's not a customer in that store, I'm there going off about the history of fabrics and what makes these clothing special and what makes people feel good about wearing the clothing. I think just being able to actually put time and effort into picking the outfit and having somebody help you and tell you when you're sort of making the wrong move helps because people don't really see themselves. This is a sub tangent. I'm gonna
Okay.
see,
A tangent of the tangent.
but there's this principle in physics, especially theoretical physics. It's the observer principle, which is the idea that if you want to measure something like the size of an atom or certain chemicals or phenomena in nature, the state that you have to put the thing in to measure it makes it behave in a way that it would not naturally behave. When you are observing it by putting a ruler on it and marking what the size is, you're having to stretch it out to the shape of the ruler so that you can measure the thing. You know what I mean? It's weird. But I think when people look at themselves standing completely static in the mirror, they're not really seeing what the clothing is going to look like because nobody's really seeing the clothing when they see you. They're seeing you having a great time or you being a complete asshole. Somebody getting dressed for their wedding, they're just going to see a person having a great time and feeling good about themselves. So when people look at themselves in the mirror, it doesn't quite look right because you're staring at yourself. It's just weird.
Right.
And unless you love yourself, which most people are okay with themselves, but I usually will just find what is the one thing that this person is worried about. And then I'm going to make sure that that thing is taken care of in a way that it wouldn't be taken care of if they didn't really know how to handle what the actual issue was. A lot of times it comes down to even just sort of pulling the pants up a little bit. Because
Hmm.
pants are sort of designed to be worn more at the belly button. And especially as guys get older, maybe not for you, you're a fit guy, but the belly sticks out a little more and the butt sort of disappears as
Right.
guys. So the
It
pants
is a
do.
weird, speaking of physics, that's like what happens. It's like it all moves to the front. So weird
Yeah.
guy's physics.
So like the belt, I mean, you got to kind of be holding the pants up from your belly button. So even just that will bring the crotch of the pants up a little bit. They'll fit better. They'll look slimmer. We can take some of the pants apart and put them back together to get that proper fit.
Hmm.
Style tip, honestly, is just build the wardrobe slowly because you don't know what you like until you start wearing it because you're really not really looking for what you like. You're just trying to avoid that thing you didn't like about that last outfit. And if you
Right.
go to a professional, an expert, and you describe that thing and they understand you, they can handle it for you.
Or you're sort of resigned. Oh, I need a suit. I always joke I have the dark gray wedding funeral business suit. It's like the universal all in suit. You know, in Ithaca, I moved to Ithaca in 1998 and I worked in economic development. There were so many suit wearers and there's so few now. But I think I've seen this in a lot of workplaces. The sort of dress code getting more and more casual does have an interesting impact on work. There's something about putting a tie on, and I give this weird example. Do you remember the Sylvester Stallone movie Over the Top? Do you know that movie? It's terrible. He's like an arm wrestler, but when he goes to arm wrestle, he cranks his baseball cap on backwards, so it's like he throws the switch. He's in the zone. But I feel like you go, you put the tie on, you feel good. Like there is a mental component to that I think really sets the tone. It goes back to respect for other people and yourself. I'm in the mode now. I'm in the work mode. The whole work from home and COVID thing, I still iron my shirt every day when I was working from home because there's part of that process for me, at least, that is it sort of puts me in that I'm at work mode. Of course, I do that on the weekend too. Maybe it's just me, but my fiance thinks it's really funny on Saturday when I'm like, even a flannel shirt, I'm like, I got to iron this because there's wrinkles in this flannel shirt. It's going to drive me crazy.
I love it. Honestly, it's like when you get dressed up, even in sports, you'll see it. And a lot of dress clothing or nicer clothing is based on kind of sportswear or clothing that was designed to be more functional. Polo shirts, evolution from playing polo, you're
Right.
riding a horse. There's so much of this kind of it's a lot of hoity-toity shit. There's actually in sort of England, there was the dress code, there was actual laws that said that you were not allowed to wear a suit unless you were somebody important. So it did come from a time when it literally did mean something, but it just sort of unifies everybody together that your shirt is tucked in, you're making sure you look okay, you didn't just roll out of bed and show up. You're ready to do the thing, you turn the hat backwards, you're locked in, you can feel it. You're channeling the same thing you were channeling last time, like a karate gi.
I guess one part of work becoming a little more casual is like sort of what you're saying, that point in time in England where, oh, well, you couldn't wear a suit if, right? Because that was keeping the classes separated. And so if you don't come from resources and you're trying to dress for a job interview, right? And this sort of, weaves its way back a little bit to like sobriety and recovery, right? If you're someone that's come through struggles or you're someone who doesn't come from a lot of resources and you're trying to like the job, and then also in Ithaca and Tompkins County, actually our Chamber of Commerce, right? We have on the job training grants that are specifically tied to folks in recovery. So that, and they do this recovery friendly employer award every year, which I think is really cool. But if you're someone that's not resourced or struggles, you have no idea how to dress for a job interview. And you're certainly not going to go spend $400-600 on a suit. So in a way, some of that more casual, or even if you do go to Target and get a suit and it's not great, at least it's creating some removal of some barriers to entry, which I guess is important too. Good sides, I guess, to some of it as well.
But with the slower fashions, another part of it is there's no logos on the outside. There's nothing about it. There's no font. There's nothing, as much as possible, that will date the photo or that will make this outfit not be viable in the future because it was a more expensive outfit. So showing up at a wedding, everybody is kind of dressed in pretty much the same as far as where it's basically shirt and tie. You have a jacket. The jacket format is a certain type of lapel. It buttons below your chest. It's got usually a notch lapel, 2 buttons in the front, flat fronted pant. It's all kind of the same format. And I'm sort of the guy. So I'm like the clothing guy. I know what all the quote unquote rules are. But if I'm at somebody's wedding, if they don't know what tuxedo rules are and it's their wedding, then these rules don't apply in this situation. And I will often find I try to compliment everybody's outfit because I love when people, dress and all. But people will be saying, "Oh, you're probably judging this outfit." And for the most part, I'm really not even, if I am looking at it at all, it's just because I'm a clothing guy. I'm just kind of loving people sort of being themselves. And I think if people come from a background where their only associations of the suit and tie is potentially negative, like maybe a court system or a lawyer or something that they would deem as bad, that there's this idea that it would separate them from me as the people that can dress like that and the people that can't. And we'll be dressing people for job interviews where the interview is today, like in an hour.
Yeah. No tailoring.
Somebody at that same interview showed up here a week ago and I have their outfit ready and it's perfect. You're showing up right now. It's not going to look as good. You're going to be a little fashionably late because you went for the fast thing. It sends the message that you're the kind of person that didn't really prepare for this as much as the person that tucked in their shirt. But, really a good suit is just going to completely disappear on you. It's just nothing memorable. You're going to remember your face, how you made them feel, what you said maybe, and then a general impression of what your outfit looked like.
Yeah, that you were appropriately dressed. You weren't wearing like a Tasmanian devil necktie. That'd be bad for an interview, but that's our super tangent. Every episode totally has tangents depending on sort of what people do. And that's what I like about it, because this ties back. We are more than sobriety and recovery. We have things that we're passionate about. I mean, for me, I collect records and I read a lot. And those are also things that are support, and clothes. I love clothes. And those are things that support, I think, my overall mental health, right? To surround myself with the things and, way more the people, things and the people that make me happy, that supports where I am. I don't even think about it when I wake up in the morning. The notion of drinking is the notion of living on Mars. It's just so far from my field of being. Some of the conversations I've had on here, people who are more recently sober, or what I see on Instagram where Sober Dad Crew's really kind of promoted the most, are people who are just, man, they are fresh in it. And it is just, they're biting the nail day by day. And it is true. It's one day at a time. And I said this at that event, I'm like, I'm in the thousands of days. I mean, I always sort of mark my anniversary in its own way. And do you ever feel tested now with your sobriety? We kind of talked about that a little bit, but are you just in this place where it feels not autopilot, but
it's pretty baked into like my concept of who I am as a person, I would say. I think I'm tested if I don't. There are times when I feel more closed off and more isolated, and there's times where I'm more open with more friends. But at this point, from what I understand about my mental health, if I don't get enough sleep or enough water or enough food, I can be have a radically different mood just based off of when the last time I ate was. And that's something that's amplified when you have a child because you start to really actually visibly see the cycle of a person needing some more water or needing
Right.
some food.
Yeah.
Or
Hangry is real. But you have like a 2.5-year-old. Man,
yeah,
that's like a direct line.
they don't know what the problem is, but they're getting a message from their gut that there is a problem. So everything they're looking at becomes the problem. And I think in addiction, that was kind of the case too. There was sort of this cosmic hunger that I couldn't identify. So I just identified all of my shortcomings as this horrible thing that was haunting me and a reason to continue going back to using instead of handling my problems. And I feel like if I'm, that amount of water or food or sleep away from being a manic, insane person, if I was to introduce drinking into the equation,
Right.
it would just it destroys my understanding of my cycle of being unhappy or happy. Even when I'm unhappy, I sort of have to kind of analyze, am I actually unhappy about that thing? Or is there some other thing before I go behave based off of this assumption that I have a right to be mad right now? Or am I just not handling my own self properly? So I feel pretty confident in my sobriety. I don't really feel tested.
Patience. Sometimes with your kids, you just have to turn on infinite patience mode. Sometimes it's a little kid, they're just tired or whatever, and you just have to try and be patient. And if you're medicating yourself or just all you can think about is I need to like get the kid to bed so I can have a couple of drinks. I don't see how you can parent well that way, or not the parent the way I want to parent for sure.
Yeah. I when I drank, it was such an emotional problem. It was really an emotional problem for me. I tend to just sort of lean into feeling bad about myself. Glad my son never had to kind of see me that way. Even when he sees me angry or upset, I feel kind of bad about it. And I feel like he's at that point now where we can sort of, he understands apologizing now. So he will say, I'm sorry for yelling. And I'll say, I'm also sorry for yelling. It's really beautiful.
I mean, well, no, and it's interesting you said that. I believe in parents apologizing to their kids so profoundly. And I don't remember quite when I figured it out. If we're telling our kids they need to apologize to us, we better friggin' be willing to apologize to them because I 100% can be unreasonable sometimes or have had a stressful day at work where things didn't go well. I live near Aurora, so I have a bit of a commute to shake it off, but I don't always. And you're right. It is beautiful when parents can be self aware, or I don't even know what the term is, but to know and understand enough. It's not the do as I say, not as I do. Kids don't remember what you say, right? They remember what you do. It's those actions as a parent or a person to the people we love. What demonstrates love? It's not the words, it's really what you do. And apologizing to your kid, reading to your kid every night. What do I remember about my dad? A lot of stuff, but he read to us every night. We would lay on the dining room floor, but he read to us every night. And that's how he reconnected with us. He's in his 80s, I'm in my 50s, and I still remember that. And I remember what that felt like. And I tried to bring that to my kids.
I love that.
Well, this was great, and I totally appreciate you taking the time. And
Yeah, I had fun. I'm sorry. I feel like because I just talk too much. That's kind of my
no,
thing.
it's
But
good. And I think it's important to talk about the sobriety, but also important. We're well-rounded like people. There's more to us than just we don't drink anymore and the reasons for that. It is what we're passionate about as people and parents. Thanks for listening. For more information, for links to any music or books we talked about, or to buy some Sober Dad Crew merchandise, please visit soberdadcrew.com.